So I guess before we get into all that at any greater depth, how did you end up as a pilot? How did you end up there? In terms of where'd you grow up? And I know you grew up here in California?
No, I was born in Pennsylvania, New Kensington, Pennsylvania. My father was in the steel business, and in 1932, my dad passed away from injuries that he had received in the First World War. And so at that time, he had retired from his business, even though he was only 36 years old at that time. But we were coming to California. And in fact, we were pretty well packed and had closed the house and the whole works. I'm 9 years old. And he went to the hospital in New York instead and passed away. And my mother, who didn't even drive an automobile at that time, I can remember her asking me, do you want to go to California? And I said, yes. And she took some driving lessons and bought a Chevy, and we came to California on Route 66 when they were building it. And so my mother prayed her way to California.
I bet if she's a new driver, I bet she wasn't the only one that was praying.
Oh, I'm sure of it. But even at 9, I can still remember she was driving in the mud of Texas, and I'm out pushing. So my mother was a very courageous woman.
No doubt.
So my dad had been very interested in aviation, and I picked that up. In fact, he used to do steel castings for Curtiss Wright in Buffalo, New York, and we'd go up there. And every time we went on a trip, and I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, we'd go flying.
Wow.
We'd go for a ride someplace. And so I picked it up at that time and pursued it.
And then you get out to California, and that's where you go through high school and whatnot?
I went through high school. I ended up in Beverly Hills High School, and September 1939, as you know, the war started. Well, just prior to that, I mean, it was all the talk of Europe and the possibility of war. And I decided that this is going to be my senior year, and if there's going to be a war, we're going to be in it one way or another. And so I went out and joined the California Air National Guard. They had a squadron that was based in Griffith Park, California, and it was a bunch of World War I pilots, and we had some old biplanes, Douglas O-38 observation aircraft, open cockpit. And some of the later ones had even had a canopy over them. And I really had been hanging around airports. My mother was very helpful. This was before I had a driver's license. She would take me out to the local airports, Grand Central Air Terminal, and I'd spend the whole day Saturday out there, and sometimes you'd even get a 10-minute ride if anybody had any money to buy gas with. But coming back to the Guard, I spent a year with them, and it was a very, very interesting year. These fellows that were the pilots, they were all mostly combat pilots from World War I. And I sat at their knee and listened to all the stories. From that, of course, my idea was I was going to be a fighter pilot. I had friends at Lockheed, and I knew about the P-38, and I decided that I wanted to fly a P-38s, and I wanted to go to England. And